as important to American photography as Aceh was to European photography was Walker Evans. Evans began photographing in the late 1920s, and during the 30s, in particular during the Depression, he documented the urban and rural scenes of the U.S. With great clarity. There are a number of stylistic things that are specific to Evans. In this particular image, the smokestack in the background is not there by accident. And the posters in the foreground, he was very interested in cultural iconography, advertising, and the clarity with which everything is seen, reminiscent of Aceh, yet distinctly American. Evans was certainly very much aware of Aceh because he was also a good friend of Bernice Abbott, who had rescued so much of Aceh's work and saw a lot of it at the Museum of Modern Art. The tradition that Walker Evans comes out of is that of Alfred Stieglitz and Edward Steichen and the photosecessionists, soft focus, images made primarily to evoke some kind of emotional response, like this. And this was not at all what Evans would become about, but this is the work that was being done around the time that he began to take pictures. This is another Stieglitz, taken, I believe, of the Waldorf Astoria in New York, and apparently just after a rain. So we have these wonderful reflections in the street, and a great tree in the foreground, very much like something Aceh might have included. This is an image by Stieglitz made near the end of his life. He was pretty much confined to his hotel room, and but he still loved taking pictures and would aim his camera out his hotel room window. Again, this is Edward Steichen. We've seen this image before, but a very influential image and very much what American photographers were looking at the time, at the turn of the century. This is by Alvin Langdon Coburn, who was another protege of Stieglitz's and whose work was included in camera work. And architecture rendered unusually in that we're looking down at it and without any perspective control. But Coburn isn't so much interested in documenting architecture as he is evoking a feeling. And this is Coburn's take on the Flatiron Building. And it appears that the camera may have been moving at the time of exposure. Certainly the people were moving, but nothing is really quite sharp, and that apparently suited his purposes. Again, this has a very soft feel to it. It's not so much documentation as an impression. Certainly a bit harder edged is the work of Paul Strand, who would become something of a hyper-realist with his photography by 1930. This is made in 1915. So that's the background that we that existed when Walker Evans began taking pictures, and he really came into his own during the Depression. He was hired by the WPA to document specific areas, although he paid very little attention to the direction that he got. If he was told to go to a city, he would go to the country. But they're some of the strongest documents made of this country at the time. And again, he has a very straightforward, clear point of view. And again, like Aceh, not hierarchical. The building is really no more important than the trees in the background or the clouds or the road. All of it is subject matter. And again, this is quite typical of Evans' style. And unusual here is the fact that he's cut off the top of the spire on this country church. Whether that had a cross on it and he's making a statement about it, I couldn't tell you. But doing that kind of thing with subject matter in the frame is not unusual for Evans, who was always looking for ways to stretch what could be done with a photograph. Here we see another straightforward building, really busy though with all of those placards and billboards. And this is a Sharecroppers House in Alabama. And Evans never used artificial light when he was photographing this kind of interior. So he would wait for the conditions to be right and then take his picture. But here we see with considerable clarity the outside of the house and also the inside. And there's no attempt to make it look romantic. It's very much, it is what it is. This is one of my favorite Walker Evans pictures for a number of reasons. One, just for this crazy barber shop. I have no idea what condition the person who painted it was in at the time, but amazing job of painting stripes. Unfortunately, you can't see it very clearly in this reproduction, but the woman who's standing in the doorway of the barber shop is wearing a blouse with a spider web on it, a very intricate spider web, which just fits perfectly with this building. I'm sure she just happened along. And I've also seen this image without her, and it's so much better with her in it. But that's unusual in architectural photography, when when an image that has a person in it works better with the person in it. Generally, if a person is in it, then it becomes much more about the person. There's something stylistic going on here, though, that I wanted to draw attention to. Evans was very aware of the edges of his frame at all times. So where he's cut off the balcony on the right and the balcony on the left is deliberate. And what he's attempting to do is show you what's there, but also allude to a world beyond the edges of the frame. So while this is a picture of merely the things that are in the frame, there is an implied world beyond it which has a certain look and feel to it. That goes even to the car in the lower right-hand corner. So Evans is always aware of all of that going on. Again, very straightforward, with the tree certainly as important in the frame as the house and the car. This is a picture of an antebellum mansion in the South, and lit entirely naturally. There's no artificial light here. So it's a matter of waiting for the right time to make the exposure. And we talked about vignetting in Eugene pictures. This is unusual in a Walker-Evans, which hardly ever shows vignetting. And I'm not quite sure what the story behind this particular image is, except that my guess is because Evans worked with different formats of cameras, that this was perhaps a lens that was designed for a 4x5 camera but used on an 8x10 camera, which would have included a lot of the edges of the image circle. Again, pretty typical of Evans' work. You see the trees clearly, we see the buildings along the street clearly, and all those wonderful Model Ts parked along the street. And it had clearly been raining. This is in Saratoga in upstate New York. Another church. And this is Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And it's not clear exactly whether he was intending it or not, but here we have a cross in a graveyard in the foreground with houses in the middle ground and factories in the background. My guess is that he is making a comment about things, but I think also it was perhaps just absolutely compelling subject matter compositionally, and that was really what overrode everything else. The result is a very powerful image.